Hello and welcome to our webinar. Excited today to talk to you about individual customers and the digital smart store. My name is Michael Goller. I'm the CTO at Detego. And the reason for this webinar, why we actually came up with the idea is a lot of the trends, when you look into the current trend prognosis, goes around the topics of personalization in retail. And this in bricks and mortar retail, from our perspective, as we work a lot in fashion retail and technology in fashion retail, can only work when you change the approach in brick and mortar stores. And today I'll talk a little bit about how we see that and how this can be implemented in brick and mortar stores. And to kick off the topic, I want to start with a number, and this number is 35%. And where it comes from is actually quite simple and I think also quite well known. In 2013, Amazon claimed that 35% of their revenue was coming from product recommendations. And yes, you could argue that this is an old number, so it's now almost 5 years old. But I don't think that this changes anything for the sake of the argument. I think the number is even higher today. What it actually shows is the power of personalized product recommendations. And this is exactly what currently sets a little bit apart the online store, the web shops of this world with brick and mortar retailing. And this is, I think, a very powerful tool that can be implemented in brick and mortar stores in order to drive sales and to increase and make a better shopping experience for consumers in the stores. So, of course, you could say in a web shop, this is quite easy to implement. All good web shops out there have a lot of KPIs and a lot of measurements to know exactly what consumers are doing. So literally Amazon knows everything about how much time you spend on an individual product, what things are being browsed, what things are being bought together. And also it's very easy to automate things in web shops in order to do experiments, A/B testing. If you recommend products, how are users reacting? And arguably, this is a lot harder in brick and mortar stores. So just measuring things there, from conversion rate in the store to actually connect to the consumer and make different approaches and different recommendations, is a lot more difficult. And this is the reason why it's a lot harder to design experiments and actually find an optimum in terms of the overall experience. So the obvious question then is, how can this be implemented in brick and mortar stores? And of course, all the concepts that you have or that are well known from online and web shops, how can these be taken and implemented into a brick and mortar store? And the obvious answer to this question is, of course, use technology, but make sensible use of technology in the stores. And across the board, wherever you look, initially what technology does is increase accuracy, increase, especially in brick and mortar stores, product availability, and increase process efficiency. So these basic tools, by implementing technology in stores, changes a little bit the way how goods are being managed, how you can engage with the consumer. And this is just a fundament of applications that you can put on top, for example, to derive actionable insights, but more importantly, and this is what we will be covering in the webinar today, to create a personal experience in the store. But before we go into that, I want to spend a couple of minutes on the fundament there. And for this purpose, I want to speak a little bit about what needs to be in place before personal experience in stores can actually be created and can create it in a way that consumers will never forget about it. So when you look in the average retailer, in the average store, the stock accuracy on a SKU level and the product availability on the sales floors is around about 70–75%. This is an industry average, and of course it doesn't apply to each and every retailer, but across the board, this is an average value that each and every study kind of reconfirms And this is a global number, so it doesn't really make a difference if you're based in Europe or if you're based in the US. And as I said earlier, with the meaningful use of technology, you can change these two figures in terms of stock accuracy and availability by changing processes to make sensible use of technology. And what we have seen and what we have implemented successfully with our customer base out there is increase these numbers to levels of very close to 100%. And we do that by implementing RFID-based stock management, which actually is one of the key drivers for sales enablement in the stores. But again, this is only a fundament. And if you want to use that accuracy, that high level quality of data to create a better consumer experience, then this is exactly what you need to give to your consumer. And we'll cover some of the use cases that we have successfully implemented and are implementing with our customers out there, how this can be utilized and how this can be transformed into a unique shopping experience. So the basics of consumer engagement, actually the use cases and the requests that consumers have, it's quite simple. When consumers come into a store, what they usually want to do is find and identify products if they are available in different colors or sizes. So these basic stock checks, currently, these are use cases where customers approach a sales associate and ask for different colors and sizes. What they also kind of actually expect, because web shops have educated us in a way to expect that, are product recommendations. When you browse on Amazon, you actually think there would be something missing if they didn't recommend you something, if they didn't send you an email afterwards saying, hey, you had a look at this, why don't you check out this other product? And of course, endless aisle concept for brick and mortar stores to make use of a enlarged product offering, of an enlarged product availability, to let you browse what's available in the warehouse, what's available in other stores. These are elements of basic consumer engagement. And the question is, how can we implement that in a meaningful way in a store? And one of the concepts that we are implementing with our customers is the fitting room, the smart fitting room. And I'm sure you have seen several concepts out there. What the fitting room as one of the key locations in the store where actually purchase decisions are made, what this application does is conceptually quite simple. So the first element, the first functional element, is the fitting room is able to detect which items are being brought into it in order to display meaningful information to the consumer. And meaningful information is everything around the product, maybe how it was manufactured, maybe what components are, why is it special. And next thing is to display availability information. So maybe you try on something in size medium, you think it doesn't really fit, so you want to check out if they have a size large available. What you would do today is you would walk out, ask a store associate, do you have this also in size large for me? The fitting room can give you that information right away, because by having a accurate data set of the product availability in the store, this information can be published, can be presented to the consumer. And of course, connecting the fitting room to sales associates in order to, for example, provide services like a call for assistance if you need additional help or whatever, or request specifically a different article. This is exactly what creates a difference in the shopping experience. And last but not least, of course, the ability to show dedicated product recommendations in the fitting room is something that drives a lot of potential in terms of cross-selling, in terms of upselling. And this is exactly what makes the difference if technology is applied in a meaningful way in the store. So concept of how this can look like, and this is actually a screenshot of an application that we have deployed with one of our customers, kind of visualizing what's happening in the store when you enter as a consumer. So first what it does is identify and display the items that you've brought into the room for trying them on. Then of course also display and inform the consumer about other different available colors and sizes. And here is again the meaningful part. If you don't have access to an accurate stock file, to accurate stock data, this is the part where it becomes challenging, because if you kind of recommend something or show to customers that you have products available that are actually not available, this is where you start to disappoint customers. And of course, this is a major impact on the consumer experience. So only recommend things where you can be confident that they are actually there. The ability to request additional services, for example, bring me a different article or I need general assistance, is something that kind of rounds up the whole shopping experience. And then, of course, the product recommendations, and we'll speak a lot more about that. It's just one of the central elements that can be taken into account what the brick and mortar store can learn from web shops. So which products to be recommended at a specific fitting room at a specific moment in time is exactly one of the big learnings that can really make a difference in retailing there. A second concept that I would like to briefly speak about is actually the concept of a smart sales assistant by means of a chatbot. So this is a product that we have recently launched, and what it brings is actually a more personalized experience. And if you compare it to a fitting room from a functional point of view, it does exactly the same thing, with a small difference. In the fitting room only knows someone's in there, but this smart sales assistant running on your mobile, on your cell phone, knows it's actually you. And this kind of personal connect can be established, for example, by linking it to social media. For example, using a Facebook Messenger to speak directly to an individual, to speak and directly address a person, which makes the whole thing even a lot more personal. So you can kind of understand from your customers what are the personal shopping preferences, what is the shopping history, in order to have really dedicated and tailored recommendations, and also allow for things like an activity after a sale has happened, or even if the sale didn't happen. So this opens a wide range of possibilities to directly address consumers in a way that wouldn't have been possible before. So I promised to speak more about recommendations, and let's get into that. So how recommendations typically work is you have things like, okay, products that are similar to something that you have just chosen, products that are frequently bought together, products that are complementary, or product recommendations based on the browsing history. So usually, and all the state-of-the-art recommendation engines kind of factor in all these different aspects and try to come up with the best possible recommendation for any given moment in time or any given browsing activity. In brick and mortar retailing, it's even a little bit more sophisticated, because you can factor in additional data points, additional information that can create a lot more personal and a lot more localized recommendations. And showing how this works. So imagine you are in a fitting room and you have this specific product with you. Recommendation engine is being fed with this information, but also with a lot of other information that can be drawn out of a sophisticated stock management system. For example, all the transactions that happen with the products in this store, but also in similar or close by stores. For example, data on how much did this specific product, how much time did it spend in this particular store? How much time did it spend in the other stores that are similar to this one? And what's the general availability of this product? Are there other sizes, other colors available of this one? Can we actually recommend products in that store that would, for example, be sold frequently with each other, but we don't have them available? Of course, you wouldn't recommend that. So factoring in all these different additional data points that are available by using, for example, RFID and IoT technologies in the store can create a difference in the recommendations to really get a tailored and more specific output of the recommendation engine. So one of the best examples around this is imagine you're approaching the end of a particular season and you have a lot of products that would be marked down starting, I don't know, week after next or so. So the ideal approach would be to try to sell these products before you enter the markdown period. So you could start to do a margin optimization and rank recommendations based on the dwell time that the products have spent already in the store. So these are just some additional data points that you can feed into that and really make optimum in terms of sales and an optimum in terms of margin. But of course, this is not all that there is to it. All the good recommendation engines out there are having some kind of feedback mechanism. And this is even a lot more powerful when you look into brick and mortar stores. So starting again from this particular recommendation in the store. So for example, you again entered the fitting room with this product. First, you would get out a set of recommendations, and we can then, by identifying what the consumer has actually chosen, what he has actually bought, feedback this information in order to update and tell the recommendation engine that this particular outcome has been very successful because it's actually led to a purchase. So by creating this feedback loop and updating what the recommendation engine proposes and then what people are choosing, you can establish a closed loop and a dedicated feedback mechanism that improves with every transaction that is being made across the season, for example. So having a self-learning system implemented into this whole process and system landscape really makes a difference and helps you to get better as the season continues, as the season progresses. So this is, again, how smart technology used in a retail environment in brick and mortar stores can really make a difference to get more personalized and more tailored recommendations over time. So speaking about getting better, how would you actually measure that recommendations work? So the obvious thing is, of course, as we already discussed, is the conversion rate. So by counting basically how many times did the recommendation actually work out, you get a hard number of basically a hard percentage of this recommendation is successful and potentially another recommendation is less successful. Another hard fact, so on the left-hand side here, we have the hard facts and the hard metrics that we can measure, is simple things like attaching a revenue to the recommendation outcomes. And you could choose whatever number you want, revenue per 1,000 recommendations or 10,000 recommendations, but this kind of gives a money value attached to the performance. And this starts to get interesting, for example, when we look into things like margin optimization, as we discussed a bit earlier. On the right-hand side, there are more the soft factors, which are a little bit harder to measure. But things like net promoter score, so the typical question of how likely are you to recommend today's shopping experience to a friend, is something that is ideally suited to kind of quantify the experience aspect of the thing. So for example, this fitting room scenario, yes, you can measure the conversion rate, but you can also measure or start to measure how people actually perceive the shopping experience that you have created. And it's not always just the hard numbers in terms of sales, in terms of revenue, but also this experience aspect that really make a difference. And especially for brands that rely a lot on a connection to the consumer, that create an emotional bonding between the brand and the consumer, this net promoter score is a very powerful tool to measure and to kind of track the shopping experience that has been created. And of course, simply the number of views. So basically how frequently is the application used, how frequently is the whole setup used, how frequently are specific products looked at, how often are they browsed. This is another soft factor that gives kind of an idea and lets you track down the overall performance, the overall perception of a dedicated setup for your consumers. So already getting to the end of the webinar, there are a couple of takeaways and most prominently summarized with the online world works a little bit different than the offline world. And no, this is not a thank you, Captain Obvious message. The important thing is that consumer engagement in the stores, it's a lot of cool things. You can do magic mirrors, you can do a lot of applications, but the important thing is that you need to build a fundament to do that. And this fundament is you need processes and you need infrastructure established to have accurate data, to be able to really make commitments to your consumers by having accurate stock information, by having products actually available. And then you can use this data to kind of build systems and applications around that that allow you to actually publish and involve your customer in this experience, provide them additional services, and connect them to store stuff using technology. For example, in applications like a smart fitting room or a personal shopping assistant. So that's it really for today. Thanks for watching and looking forward to getting you on board for our next webinar. Thanks and bye-bye.